The Titanic stands as a renowned historical calamity and remains widely acknowledged, especially after its depiction in the legendary cinematic masterpiece of 1997. However, recent developments have brought to light a significant discovery. An ancient camera was recovered from the depths of the ocean. Captured by a brave photographer, this camera's unearthing from the Titanic reveals life on the ship before its tragic sinking. But what secrets of the Titanic did this camera harbor within it for decades? And just how would it influence our view of this iconic vessel? Join us as we explore these remarkable images that have just made the light of day and unearth invaluable lessons from this horrifying event. The Titanic's illustrious legacy. The Titanic was an extraordinary ship that gained unparalleled popularity in history. It stood as a magnificent vessel in its own right, but its fame arose from a tragic event that resulted in the loss of thousands of lives. This ultra-luxury steamship set sail on its maiden voyage on April 15, 1912, only to meet with a devastating fate off the coast of Newfoundland in the North Atlantic. The Titanic collided with a massive iceberg, leading to its sinking during the early hours of that fateful day. The story of the Titanic has captivated the world, inspiring numerous books, articles, and films. One of the most well-known adaptations is the blockbuster movie Titanic, released in 1997, featuring the talented actors Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. Beyond the realm of entertainment, the saga of this ship has become a cautionary tale, reminding us of the perils of human overconfidence and pride. However, many people may not be aware that the creation of the Titanic was the outcome of fierce competition among rival shipping lines in the early 20th century. The White Star Line, in particular, found itself engaged in a fierce battle for steamship supremacy with Cunard, a renowned British firm. Both companies sought to outdo each other by constructing exceptional vessels, showcasing their time's pinnacle of sophistication and luxury. These two companies boasted standout ships, each striving to be the pinnacle of technological advancement and opulence. The ships crafted by the White Star Line and Cunard were considered marvels of engineering, adorned with lavish amenities and designed to provide an unparalleled travel experience. These vessels stood as icons of their era, showcasing the ingenuity and grandeur of early 20th century maritime achievements. The competition between these shipping lines was fierce, with each vying for the attention and patronage of affluent travelers. The Titanic emerged as the White Star Line's response to Cunard's impressive ships. It was a symbol of their ambition, an embodiment of their determination to create the most extraordinary vessel ever seen. In 1907, a remarkable ship called Mauretania, owned by Cunard, achieved something truly incredible. It set a speed record for the fastest average speed during a transatlantic crossing. The ship traveled at an impressive rate of 23.69 knots, which is equivalent to about 27.26 miles per hour. This record-breaking achievement remained unchallenged for a staggering 22 years. During this time, the chief executive of the White Star Line, J. Bruce Ismay, engaged in discussions with William J. Perry, the chairman of Harland & Wolff, a shipbuilding company. They contemplated the construction of 3 massive ships. Coincidentally, the same year that Cunard unveiled its splendid Mauretania, they introduced 2 magnificent liners known as the Olympic class of liners. These vessels were truly grand in size, measuring an astonishing 882 feet in length and 92.5 feet in width at their widest point. This made them the largest ships of their time. The Birth of Titanic. The construction of the Titanic began in March of 1909 at the Harland Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland. The workers started building this magnificent ship, which would soon become one of the most famous ships in history. For 2 years straight, from 1909 to 1911, the construction of the Titanic continued without any breaks. The shipyard buzzed with activity as the workers tirelessly labored on this colossal project. They dedicated their time and effort to bring the ship to life. Finally, on May 31st, 1911, a remarkable moment arrived. The Titanic's massive hull, which happened to be the largest movable man-made object at the time, gracefully glided down the slipways and entered Belfast's River Wagon. This extraordinary event gathered an astonishing crowd of over 100,000 people who eagerly witnessed the majestic ship taking its first steps into the water. The launch was an astounding success, proceeding smoothly in just over a minute without any issues or complications. Immediately after the launch, the hull was towed to a massive fitting-out dock. Here, thousands of workers embarked on a year-long endeavor to complete the construction of the ship. They skillfully constructed the ship's decks, meticulously crafted lavish interiors, and meticulously installed the 29 massive boilers that would power the Titanic's 2 main steam engines. This bustling dock became a hub of creativity and craftsmanship, as every detail was meticulously attended to, ensuring the Titanic would be a marvel of engineering and luxury. A voyage of grandeur. When the Titanic embarked on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England on April 10, 1912, it caused quite a commotion, and people gathered to witness this historic event. After brief stops in France and Queenstown, Ireland, the majestic ship continued its journey toward New York. On board were a total of 2,240 passengers and crew, which were referred to as souls in the shipping industry at that time. This term included everyone on the ship, emphasizing the crew's importance and responsibility to ensure their safety. Among these souls were not just ordinary people, but a distinguished group of high-ranking officials, wealthy industrialists, dignitaries, and even celebrities. They all eagerly anticipated the luxurious experience and the honor of being part of the Titanic's first transatlantic crossing. As the ship prepared to depart, J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, was one of the first to arrive. Thomas Andrews, the skilled ship's builder from Harlan & Wolff, accompanied him. Together they oversaw the final preparations and ensured that every detail was perfect for the esteemed guests. Interestingly, J.P. Morgan, whose International Mercantile Marine Shipping Trust controlled the White Star Line, had planned to join his colleagues on the Titanic. However, to his disappointment, he had to cancel his trip due to a last-minute business matter. Prominent passengers aboard. This luxurious ship was filled with passengers from different walks of life. Among them, the wealthiest person on board was John Jacob Astor IV, a man who possessed immense riches inherited from the Astor family fortune. His name had already made headlines the year before when he captured the public's attention by marrying Madeline Talmadge Force, a young woman 29 years his junior, shortly after divorcing his first wife. However, Mr. Astor was not the only notable passenger aboard this remarkable vessel. Isidore Straus, the elderly owner of Macy's, and his wife Ida were also present. Their prominence was later reflected in the popular Titanic film. Another influential figure on board was Benjamin Guggenheim, an industrialist of great wealth. His mistress, valet, and chauffeur were accompanying him, creating an entourage of opulence. But amidst the opulence and grandeur, there was also a remarkable woman named Margaret Molly Brown. Known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, she was a widow and heiress who carried herself with confidence and bravery. During the chaotic moments when lifeboats were being loaded, Molly Brown helped maintain calm and order. Her unwavering spirit and uplifting presence boosted the morale of her fellow survivors, leaving an enduring legacy. A group of very important people, like famous and important individuals, arrived, and the employees who cared for them mostly traveled in a lower class. Along with them were also academics, tourists, journalists, and others who would receive similar service and accommodations as the first-class passengers on other ships. However, the largest group of passengers, numbering over 700, were in third class. They outnumbered the passengers in the other 2 levels combined. Some of them had paid less than $20 to travel across the ocean. The third class was where the shipping lines, like White Star, made the most profit. The Titanic was specifically designed to provide these passengers with accommodations and amenities that were better than what could be found on any other ship at that time. The Titanic's Fateful Encounter. After sailing for 4 days without significant events, the Titanic suddenly received occasional ice reports from other ships. Despite the calm seas and clear sky without a moon, a lookout spotted an iceberg emerging from a slight haze directly ahead at around 11:30 p.m. The lookout immediately rang the warning bell and informed the bridge. The ship's engines were swiftly reversed, and a sharp turn was made to avoid a direct collision with the iceberg. Fortunately, instead of hitting the iceberg head-on, the Titanic seemed to graze along its side, causing ice fragments to scatter onto the forward deck. The lookouts' anxiety eased as they witnessed no immediate collision. However, there was an unknown danger lurking beneath the water's surface. The iceberg had a jagged underwater spur that inflicted a 300-foot-long gash in the ship's hull below the waterline. By the time the captain and Harland and Wolff's Thomas Andrews inspected the damaged area, water had already flooded 5 compartments. As a result, the front part of the ship began to tilt downwards, allowing water to flow from one compartment to another, making the situation worse. Thomas Andrews quickly did some calculations and estimated that the Titanic could stay afloat for about an hour and a half, maybe a little longer. Meanwhile, the captain, who had already asked the wireless operator to call for help, ordered the lifeboats to be loaded. This was the moment when chaos erupted. Around an hour after hitting the iceberg, a disorganized and messy evacuation took place. The lifeboats on the ship were meant to carry 65 people each, but many of them were launched with far fewer people on board. Unfortunately, this resulted in the loss of many lives. It was a tragic situation, and this unfortunate pattern marked the rescue operation. In the confusion and panic before the Titanic sank, almost every lifeboat was launched with significantly fewer passengers than they could have carried. Some lifeboats were even launched with only a handful of people aboard. The forgotten photographs. A journalist named Scene in Maloney has recently made a remarkable discovery, an obscured collection of photographs depicting the Titanic. These precious images, which had been concealed in an attic for an extended period, had fallen into oblivion. Originally in the possession of John Kempster, the Titanic's esteemed chief electrical engineer, these photographs were on the verge of being auctioned off individually. However, fortune smiled upon them as a collector successfully negotiated to preserve their unity. Maloney, a devoted researcher of the Titanic tragedy for more than 3 decades, presents captivating findings of substantial intrigue. One of the images shows something intriguing, a long, dark mark on the ship's hull, measuring around 30 feet. This mark is exactly where the iceberg was known to have struck the Titanic. Experts at the Imperial College of London have determined that this mark was caused by a coal fire in a 3-story high coal bunker on the ship. It turns out that even before the Titanic set sail from Belfast, a coal fire was discovered on board. A fireman named Charles Hendrickson, who worked for the White Star Line, had to testify about this fire during the investigation that followed the sinking. To put out the fire, Hendrickson and a few others had to throw the burning coal into the ship's furnace. But since the fire was in a bunker, it wasn't an easy task. So why didn't they just stop the fire? Well, coal is highly flammable, and dealing with a coal fire is tough, even under the best circumstances. Even if we had all the world's resources and plenty of space to work with, putting out a coal fire can be nearly impossible. Let's take a look at the coal fire in Centralia, Pennsylvania, for example. This fire started in a mine in the northeastern United States and has been burning for over 60 years. Despite many attempts, they couldn't extinguish it. Some parts of the fire reached temperatures of around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit and released deadly carbon monoxide gas. Eventually, the government gave up trying to put out the fire and decided to buy all the land from the people who had to leave their homes. Centralia has become a tourist attraction where people visit to see the smoke and empty buildings. So just imagine how challenging it would be to deal with a fire on a ship, especially with limited space. No matter how big the Titanic was, it was still just a ship. The Failed Bulkheads. Maloney studied the American investigation of the Titanic's sinking. Firefighter Fred Barrett reported that the bulkhead failed when the iceberg hit. Barrett sought refuge in a different compartment designed to keep water out, just behind the damaged bulkhead. Later, he saw green foam rushing between the boilers. Luckily, he escaped the water because the bulkhead had failed. Maloney's investigation suggests that the ship sank quickly after this. He found photos supporting his theory. A hidden fire damaged the bulkhead, and excessive coal use increased ship speed. The intense heat caused the bulkhead to fail. Maloney believes the Titanic's passengers could have been saved if the bulkheads held. Another ship was on its way to help. If the Titanic stayed afloat a few more hours, the disaster could have been avoided. Bulkheads were like protective walls against bad weather, keeping water out. The Titanic had few lifeboats because people believed the ship was a giant lifeboat, so if the bulkheads failed, disaster was inevitable, the grandeur of the Titanic's design. The ship left the port even though there was a fire on board. This decision was made because the company, White Star Line, was facing financial troubles. The Titanic's debut had been delayed, and its sister ship had been damaged, causing more economic losses. The company could have collapsed if the Titanic didn't sail on time. The official inquiry into the disaster downplayed some important factors. One of the inspectors, Maurice Clark, claimed that he was unaware of the fire and could have prevented the ship from sailing. However, similar incidents in the past should have guided him to take action. The British inquiry deliberately ignored the possibility of an uncontrolled fire, which is not surprising given the history of similar cases. In 1910, another ship with a spontaneous coal fire in its bunkers had experienced an explosion, fatalities, and panic. This incident was widely communicated to all shipping companies. Despite this knowledge, the Titanic still sailed 2 years later with its coal in even worse condition. The Titanic had a fancy and expensive design, even for the lowest-class passengers. The grand staircase was the most impressive feature, made of shiny oak, strong iron, and beautiful glass. It was located under a stunning dome, creating a natural light effect. The centerpiece was a carved panel with a clock. Passengers could use the stairs or modern elevators to reach the first-class dining room. The movie Titanic accurately recreated the grand staircase based on the original plans and materials. First-class passengers gathered in a lounge decorated in the Edwardian style, playing cards and discussing hot topics. The ship had areas like the promenade, bridge, and decks for passenger accommodations. Other sections were reserved for the crew, cargo, and machinery. The boat and promenade decks were on top of the ship's main structure. They didn't cover the entire length of the ship. The Titanic's boat deck was the highest deck and earned its name because it held lifeboats. It was the only open area on the ship's deck. First- and second-class passengers could take leisurely walks, sit on benches, play a game similar to horseshoes, or find peace in quiet thoughts. Third-class passengers walked on the bridge deck since they were not allowed on the boat deck. The bridge deck was a raised platform at the back of the ship. However, they had to share this crowded space with cargo and equipment. Luxury and elegance on the Titanic's first class. The fancy gymnasium on the Titanic was for wealthy passengers. It had exercise equipment like weights, rowing machines, and even a mechanical horse and camel. To use it, you paid 25 cents to the gymnasium steward, Thomas Macaulay. Only first-class men could use the gymnasium. The Titanic also had luxurious Turkish baths for male first-class passengers. For $1, they could access rooms with different temperatures. There was a steam room, a private toilet, and a shampooing room. The Turkish baths had a marble drinking fountain, beautiful Arabic-style tiles, and comfortable chairs for relaxation. Along with the gym and Turkish baths, the Titanic's first-class area had many public rooms like a dining room, reception room, restaurant, lounge, reading and writing room, smoking room, veranda cafes, and palm courts. Rich families on the Titanic could make their own suites by connecting fancy cabins. The Café Parisien was a trendy dining place resembling Parisian cafes. First-class passengers enjoyed the promenade's veranda cafe and palm courts, with large windows, wicker furniture, plants, and checkered floors. The veranda cafe was a favorite spot for first-class children to gather. A luxurious lounge with oak paneling and private alcoves allowed socializing, inspired by the Palace of Versailles. It served coffee, tea, and liqueurs. The reading and writing room, designed for first-class women, was tastefully furnished. To enter the promenade deck, occupants passed through a large bow window. A cozy fire provided warmth in the room. The fancy lounge for first-class passengers was on the promenade deck and had luxurious furnishings. This room was designated for reading, chatting, playing cards, and other social activities. It would be decorated in France's elegant Louis XV style, with superb craftsmanship. The walls were covered with beautiful tapestries, giving the room a balanced and symmetrical look. The magnificent smoking room for first-class passengers was located towards the back of the promenade deck. The walls of this room were made of mahogany panels carved in the Georgian style and adorned with mother-of-pearl inlays. Above the central fireplace hung a painting by Norman Wilkinson, depicting the journey to the New World. Those who desired a drink after dinner could visit the well-stocked bar, while others enjoyed leisurely walks around the room, admiring the painted glass windows showcasing different ports from around the world and other ships of the White Star Line. A small veranda area on the left side of the room led to the Palm Court, which overlooked the aft section of the promenade deck. The room had the appearance of a conservatory, with walls covered in trellises adorned with climbing plants. Passengers could relax and enjoy their drinks on comfortable wicker chairs while taking in the view. The big fancy room at the front, right after the huge staircase, was really long, about 54 feet. It had a cool Jacobean style with a white ceiling and a dark, rusty carpet. This room was like a gathering place for the important passengers before dinner. They could all hang out and chat about what happened that day on the ship. There were lots of comfy chairs with pretty flower patterns for them to sit in. Which of these profoundly unsettling accounts regarding the Titanic were the most disconcerting? Let's have your answers in the comments below.